In the heart of the desert, on the western bank of the Nile, rises a pyramid that has outlived kings, gods, and empires. This is the Great Pyramid of Giza, built by Pharaoh Khufu, or known to the world as Cheops. But behind the stone, behind the mathematics and the monumental architecture, lies another story, one that has almost disappeared, written on fragile papyrus, and survived against time. It is a story of magic, prophecy, and divine intervention in royal power. It's about the Westkar Papyrus. Discovered in the 19th century with uncertain origins, the papyrus carries through the ages 5 narratives. 5 stories told in the court of Pharaoh Khufu, each connected to a particular miracle, each carrying a specific message. But these are no ordinary tales. This is a political power map, and like any good myth, it doesn't lie. It just speaks a different language. The Westkar Papyrus was discovered not in an ancient tomb, but in the hands of the English traveller Henry Westkar in the early 19th century. It is not known under what circumstances he acquired it, and the document is not precisely dated, leaving question marks in the archaeological community. After his death, the papyrus fell into the hands of the German Egyptologist Richard Lepsius, who passed it on to the Egyptian Museum in Berlin, where it is preserved today. This document is neither a funerary formula nor a religious text. It is a narrative, prose imbued with wonder, moral lessons, and magic. And that is what makes it unique. The Westerosi Papyrus transports us to the royal court of Khufu, where the real and the supernatural not only coexist, but interact. The artifact itself is made of standard strips of the papyrus plant, glued together and rolled into a roll. The surviving piece is about 160 centimeters, 62 inches, long, with a significant portion of the first narrative damaged. It is written in hieratic script, a cursive version of hieroglyphics used for administrative and literary purposes. The surface is fragile, with yellowed and ragged edges, and the ink has faded, making the translation particularly challenging. The text is not simply a list of wonders. It is a framing story, a structure familiar to us from later literary traditions. It all begins with the Pharaoh Khufu seeking inspiration and truth. To cheer him up, or perhaps to enlighten him, his sons tell stories about great magicians of the past. Each tale is set in a different historical context and showcases extraordinary events. A priest who brings animals to life, a magician who parts the waters of a lake, a wax crocodile that comes to life, a prophecy of a new dynasty foretold by a mysterious sage. But let's hear the stories themselves and find out what their deeper purpose and meaning really was. The first narrative is set in the time of Pharaoh Djoser, one of the most famous rulers of the Third Dynasty, who lived around the 27th century BC. The name that appears at the end of this fragment is Imhotep, architect, priest, healer, sage, a figure around whom history and mythology intertwine to such an extent that they become one. He was the creator of the first stepped pyramid at Saqqara and was later worshipped as a demigod. Surviving lines from the papyrus hint that Imhotep performed some miracle to help Pharaoh Djoser. Exactly what it was remains a matter of conjecture, but it probably involved restoration, healing, or supernatural intervention. The story may have been inspired by later legends in which Imhotep is shown as a wise healer, able to curb even the elements of nature and human pain. This story, though fragmentary, serves a key function in the composition of the papyrus. It begins the tradition of a narrative of a miracle performed in ancient times that serves as a precedent. The choice of Djoser and Imhotep is not accidental. It is a purposeful connection between authority and magic. In an age where the pharaoh was considered the god of the land, priests like Imhotep were the ones who could come into direct contact with unseen forces. They do not just serve the cult, they shape reality through knowledge, rituals, and symbols. The narrative, even in its incompleteness, reinforces the notion that magic has existed from the beginning and has always been in the service of royal power. A second story is told by Prince Khafra, son of Khufu and future pharaoh. The setting is the royal court of Pharaoh Nebka, ruler of the Third Dynasty. The protagonist is the priest Ubaona, a high-ranking scholar, spiritual leader, but also a husband whose loyalty is put to the test. His wife turns out to be unfaithful. Her lover, a commoner, is invited into their home while her husband is away. But Ubaoner understands and reacts not with anger, but with something far cooler and more terrifying: ritual magic. He creates a wax model of a crocodile, small, innocent in appearance, but charged with cruel intent. The moment the wax figure is placed in water, it comes to life, transforming into a true predator that, when the woman's lover reappears, drags him into the depths of the lake. After 7 days, Ubaoner leads Pharaoh Nebka to the spot, orders the crocodile to come out, and the animal surfaces alongside the trapped man. Pharaoh does not hesitate. He orders the crocodile to bring the man back to the bottom and the unfaithful wife to be publicly punished and burned. Ubaoner's deed is not only forgiven, it is approved. This story, in fact, is not just a demonstration of magic. It is a demonstration of control, justice, and most of all, the acceptance of magic as an instrument of legality in the ancient Egyptian world. It is also important who tells this story: the son of the pharaoh. In a world where heirs must demonstrate an understanding of order, this story is a political act. It shows that order is not imposed by force alone, but by moral clarity and control over the unseen. The third story transports us to the time of Pharaoh Snofru, an ancestor of Khufu himself. Snofru is famous for building not one, but 2 pyramids, including the unique Scythian pyramid at Dashur. But the narrative is not about architecture. Snofru is tired and irritable. Nothing could cheer him up. The courtyard offered him all kinds of entertainment, music, priests, but none could bring him out of his melancholy. Then he turned to a trusted advisor, the priest Dejemok. The solution: a lavish sail in a boat manned by 20 maidens, the most beautiful in the palace, dressed in net robes. They will row, they will sing, they will dance, and Pharaoh will forget about the weight of the crown. But as often happens in stories that begin with pleasures, something dramatic happens. One of the maidens drops her turquoise locket into the lake, a small object but one of great significance to her. Then she refuses to continue singing. The rowing stops. The fun disappears. Snofru orders that she be given another medallion, but she refuses. It is not the same. It is not hers. Then Dejemok intervenes again. No excitement, no theater. Just using a spell that parts the waters of the lake. The next moment, the lost pendant glittered among the exposed sands of the bottom. He goes down, picks it up, and returns everything to its original state. The waters close in and the songs and fun continue. This story may seem light and almost comical, but it reveals the social reality. First, the importance of the subject matter. Turquoise is not just an ornament. In Egypt, it was associated with protection, blessing, and even the goddess Hathor, patron of women, music, and love. Losing the pendant creates a hole in the maiden's magical protection. Her refusal to continue is a refusal to break this sacred order. Second, the role of the priest. He does not punish, he does not protect, he restores. Here, magic serves not justice but harmony. It restores order to a world where pleasure and ritual often go together. Third, the image of the pharaoh. Snofru is shown not as a great conqueror or sage, but as a man, bored and dependent on the moods of his surroundings. This makes him more human, but also vulnerable. The story hints that even the most powerful are captive to the moods of those beneath them. A fourth story is told by none other than Prince Georgiadef, son and advisor of Khufu himself. It refers to a miracle that occurred during the reign of Khufu himself. The prince tells of a subject named Jedi. He was 110 years old, ate 500 loaves of bread, and drank 100 jugs of beer a day. But that's not what got the pharaoh's attention. Jedi was famous for something else. He could reconstruct severed heads and knew the number of secret chambers in Thoth's sanctuary. Intrigued because Khufu himself wanted to build similar halls to Thoth's, he sent his son to invite the sage to the palace. Upon arrival, Jedi is ordered to return the heads of the decapitated goose and bull. He places them back on the bodies, and they come back to life. No pain, without a scar. Impressed, Khufu questions him about Thoth's shrine. Jedi replies that he doesn't know the exact number of rooms, but he knows where they are. However, he refuses to give their location. This secret, he says, does not belong to Khufu, but to whoever will come after him. And then he utters the following prophecy. 3 brothers will be born, sons of the priestess Redege. They will not be of his dynasty, but they will carry legitimate authority. They will be pharaohs. They will found the Fifth Dynasty. This is the psychological and political center of the papyrus. Whereas previous narratives dealt with justice, whims, or miracles, here the stakes are royal power. Jedi's prophecy undermines Khufu's power without direct threat, but with a fatal blow. Your line will not last. This is a grave moment. But Khufu doesn't punish, he doesn't reject, doesn't challenge. The story ends with a tribute to Jedi. The old man walks away with rewards and respect. Politically, this story serves as a legitimization of the historical transition from the 4th to the 5th dynasty. Now we are left with a question. Who are these children? Where are they? And how exactly will their era begin? The final tale follows, where prophecy becomes reality. In the 5th tale, the scene of action shifts from the luxury of the royal court to the humble home of Redege, priestess of Ra. She is pregnant. She is expecting 3 sons who are said to have been conceived with divine involvement. It is not clear whether Ra is their father in a literal or symbolic sense, but the intervention of the gods is about to become visible. Knocking at her door are 5 deities transformed into traveling musicians: Isis, Nephthys, Meshene, Hecate, and Hanum, deities of birth, protection, and destiny. They want to help her, and she lets them. The difficult birth has begun. The first child comes out, Uzurkaf. The goddess Meshenet announces, he will be king of Upper and Lower Egypt. The second, Sahura, is bestowed with another blessing. The third, Neferirkara. A prophecy is given for each child. For each child a destiny is ordained. This birth is not a biological act, but a political and cosmic act of creation. The gods then leave, leaving the seed of the new dynasty. Later, Redeget's maidservant gets into an argument with her mistress, gets beaten, and, angry, runs away with the intention of telling King Khufu what happened. On the way, she meets her brother and tells him the story. Displeased, he also beats her and sends her to the riverbank where she is swallowed by a crocodile. The brother then goes to Redeget, who wails over the maid's disappearance. The brother begins to tell what happened, and it is at this point that the papyrus with the story breaks. Its last lines are lost forever. It's as if the document itself breaks at the moment the world rearranges itself. This last narrative comes full circle. Jedi foretold, and here the prophecy is embodied. Magic is no longer a ritual. It is life. The gods descend and conceive the new power, not through coup, not through war, but through birth. The elements of myth and reality are intertwined in a manner typical of ancient Egyptian thought. The birth of the pharaohs is not just a historical event, it is a cosmic adjustment. The names of the 3 sons are not invented. Uzurkaf, Sahura, and Neferirkara are real pharaohs from the beginning of the 5th dynasty, which makes this narrative not just a myth, but a legitimate text. It explains to the people, to future rulers, to history, that the power of the 5th dynasty was by the will of the gods. With this story, the Westkar Papyrus ends, not with a period, but with a break. Just as life continues beyond history, so does power, beyond a pharaoh. With these 5 narratives, this document does not just tell of wonders, but builds a bridge between the old world and the new. A pharaoh listens to the stories of the past, and through them, understands the future. Indeed, there was no bloodshed in Egypt between the end of the 4th and the beginning of the 5th dynasties. There were no coups, no dramatic change of power in the style of later dynastic collapses. But a transformation does occur that changes the nature of government. The 4th dynasty was the golden age of monumental architecture. Khufu, Jedefra, Khafra, and Menkaura built pyramids that still astound with their scale. It was a time of supreme centralism, when the pharaoh was almost the absolute god of the land. But with the advent of the 5th dynasty, things changed. The pyramids became smaller, more modest. the supremacy of the king gave way to the influence of the priestly elite. The center of religion shifts to the cult of Ra, the sun god, especially in Heliopolis. The new rulers, Userkaf, Sahura, Neferirkara, put solar theology at the heart of governance. Inscriptions and artifacts from the early Fifth Dynasty confirm their names mentioned in the papyrus. Userkaf, founder of the dynasty, is documented in inscriptions at Abusir. Sahura leaves a tomb complex with inscriptions that emphasize the role of solar temples, a key religious element that emerged with this particular dynasty. Neferirkara continued this line by strengthening priestly institutions. At Heliopolis, the sacred city of Ra, archaeologists have uncovered the foundations of so-called solar temples, which are dedicated not to dead kings, but to the sun as a divine entity. This confirms the turn to the solar cult described symbolically in the last narrative. Historians emphasize this is not just a change of names in a king list. It is an ideological shift from Pharaoh as demigod to Pharaoh as high priest of the sun. Power becomes more distributed, at least on a spiritual level. Therefore, the fifth narrative is not an accidental conclusion to the papyrus. It explains this change, not as a political transaction, but as divine intervention. And what the Diary of Merer, who was directly involved and supervised the building of some of the pyramids in Egypt, reveals to us, you will find out in the video you see on the left.